The years 1993 to 1995 found Eazy-E constantly being on the defensive within an industry he had helped spawn, but nevertheless seemed to pass him by. He may have landed the haymaker that was real Compton CDGs against his former friend and now fiercest rival, Dr. Dre, but to the mainstream it didn't matter. The Chronic, catapulting 3 singles into the top 40 of the Billboard Hot 100 chart, made Dr. Dre a one-of-a-kind superstar, the combination of a producer and rapper. The Chronic was still within the top 10 tier of the Billboard 200 chart when Dre's protege, Snoop Doggy Dogg, made his debut with Doggy Style in November 1993. It was arguably the most anticipated debut album up to that point, and it didn't disappoint. Over 806,000 copies were sold in the United States in its first week of release, a record for a debuting artist at the time. Death Row Records, home to Dre and Snoop, was truly in the house. Really though. Eazy-E's EP, It's On Dr. Dre 187 Killer, was actually one of the better selling rap releases of 1993, whether EP or LP, but it felt like a pebble next to the twin boulders that were Dre's and Snoop's debut albums. Eazy-E's Ruthless Records, once the indomitable and uncontested powerhouse of the West Coast, was now firmly second to Death Row. The truth was, apart from the founder and CEO, no one in Ruthless was generating gold or platinum sales, whether it was the mainstays like Above the Law, Cocaine, and N.W.A. alumnus MC Ren, or wacky named newer signees like Blood of Abraham, Hoes with Attitude, Gangsta Bitch Mentality, Pistol, Stefan, Atman Clan, and Menage a Trois. Even Brownside, who Eazy signed to a distribution deal as a Chicano version of N.W.A, never caught on, mainly due to being more volatile than their black counterparts had ever been. The act that reinvigorated Ruthless Records came not from Eazy-E's backyard, but rather from a most unlikely source, a region that had barely registered on the hip-hop map: the Midwest. A quintet from Cleveland, Ohio, Bone Enterprise, enthralled Eazy-E when he heard them over the phone. They not just rapped, but they also alternated between singing, harmonizing, and varying the velocity of their rhyming. It was unlike anything on the hip-hop landscape, including over at Death Row. Reformed as Bone Thugs and Harmony, the group, brought over to Ruthless, was granted the record label's good old EP template with Creepin' on a Come Up. The EP was released in June 1994, yielding 2 Billboard Hot 100 singles, one of which featured Eazy-E himself, and outsold any EP that N.W.A. and its alumni ever released. It even eventually outsold any record Death Row put out in 1994. It felt like Ruthless was experiencing a second wind, and that would not include Jerry Heller. More than just a music manager, Heller had also invested in the company, assisting in its prosperity in the late 1980s to early 1990s. But considering how N.W.A. disintegrated, and now with reports that he was siphoning money from Ruthless, it only confirmed to those who were either suspicious of the guy or never liked him. Heller was the problem, and it always came down to the money with him. According to Heller, he would receive his walking papers from Eazy in February 1995, ending a partnership that had lasted almost 8 years. But in the meantime, Eazy-E had a hot group to promote, and it looked like his own group might get back together. In New York with Bone Thugs and Harmony for a Yo MTV Raps appearance in November 1994, the Ruthless boss crossed paths with fellow N.W.A. alumnus Ice Cube. As they talked, the animosity fading, they recognized the common enemy in Jerry Heller and went into the conditions for getting the group back together. Dre had to be part of it, and the slow process of reconciliation began when he and Dr. Dre, after a bitter feud of almost half a decade, spoke on the phone early next year. Things seemed to be turning out for the better. But no one could have anticipated the time bomb that was about to go off, especially Eazy-E. There was no talk about an Eazy-E album. With the consuming conflict between Ruthless and Death Row, and now the explosive success of Bone Thugs and Harmony, temporary insanity quietly faded into history, figuratively locked away in a vault somewhere as a collection of songs and scraps. Besides, there was a debut album to prepare for Bone Thugs, as well as the promise of a reunifying N.W.A album, despite the logistics that needed to be worked out between two warring sides. But something was off. Sure, the Californian kid was unaccustomed to the generally colder climate of the East Coast, but that cough should have been gone by the time he returned to home base. Instead, the cough got worse, progressing into wheezing and shortness of breath. By the time Eazy-E collapsed in the hallway, about to record a verse for a song that BG Knockout and Dresta were working on, it was a diss against Death Row signees, the Dog Pound, entitled DPGK. Everyone around him determined that he had to head for the hospital and get checked out. This was definitely more than the chronic bronchitis that had plagued him throughout his life, so inhalers weren't going to cut it. It was at Cedars-Sinai Hospital where Eazy received the devastating news. He had full-blown AIDS. Both in real life and on wax, Eazy-E was the most notorious womanizer in all of rapdom. His numerous dalliances and romps, some of which took place in his stately office, were well known. By 1995, Eazy was father to 10 children with 8 women, one of which was Tamika Woods, the closest to him due to her music industry experience. Tamika was then pregnant with who would turn out to be his 11th child. His last. Eazy-E rapidly deteriorated while Ruthless Records imploded around him, a lethal cocktail of shock about his health and confusion about who was in charge of his affairs. In the midst of the chaos, with Heller ousted, Tamika rose as not just a person in charge of Ruthless, but also co-executor of Eazy's estate, having gotten hitched to Eazy on March 14th while he awaited surgery to drain fluid from his lungs. There will be no recovery for the hip-hop thugster. The suddenness of Eazy-E's final illness was easy to spark a healthy number of speculations and conspiracy theories, ranging from reasonable to ridiculous. Tamika and the son she had of Eazy both tested HIV negative, and no one could locate any of Eazy's partners that had the virus. Eazy's attending physician was accused of being professionally unqualified, and death row overlord Suge Knight was accused of injecting Eazy with HIV. But nothing could convince medical experts that anything was out of the ordinary.
Rapper Eazy-E has died in Los Angeles after a battle with AIDS. Eazy-E, whose real name
Eazy-E, at the age of 30, died on March 26, 1995, as a result of pneumonia, a common affliction among AIDS patients. His AIDS was most likely triggered by a combination of his already compromised immune system, the stress of running a record label which included his conflict with Death Row, and the cold weather to which he was exposed in New York. And it's most likely that he contracted HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, from a sexual partner a while back, possibly before he became famous. Either way, as Eazy-E, decked in a Compton hat, Pendleton flannel shirt, and jeans, was lowered in a gold casket at Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, California, hip-hop grappled with a loss. Eazy was the first high-profile figure in rap music history to die young, and while Tamika Woods, now Tamika Woods Wright, took on the task of streamlining Ruthless Records, including a purge of most of its roster, there had to be something from those temporary insanity recording sessions, as well as more recent ones, to cobble together what should have been Eazy-E's second studio album. That would definitely help in continuing to replenish the company's coffers alongside Bone Thugs-N-Harmony. Judging from the theft of 2 titanium suitcases that contained master tapes while Eazy-E was on his deathbed, there had to be enough material. And sure enough, an album arrived on January 30th, 1996, entitled Straight Off the Streets of Motherfucking Compton. Gangsta rap might have been at its artistic and commercial peak during the mid-90s, but by then, the subgenre was under scrutiny like never before. As though in response to the mounting criticism, there arose a version of gangsta rap that was less profane and more palatable to a wider audience. The hits that charted the highest on the Billboard Hot 100 during 1994 and 1995 came from neither Death Row nor Ruthless, but rather from other acts that sprouted from the N.W.A family tree, such as Coolio and Warren G. But nothing was going to tone down Eazy-E's content in Straight Off the Streets, and for good reason. Eazy and Dre may have started to make amends, but the war between Ruthless and Death Row continued unabated. A new pair of Death Row recruits, the previously mentioned The Dog Pound, had jumped into the fray with What Would You Do, which appeared on 2 soundtracks in 1994. In the song, The Dog Pound fired some shots at BG Knockout specifically, and the entire Ruthless camp in general, and Ruthless was game for a response. The album barely begins before Eazy and BG Knockout and Dresta deliver a sequel to Real Compton CDGs with Old School Shit, which feels like a retreading of tires. Yella is on board for a dark alley of synths as support for Eazy-E to slam Dre for being inauthentic and envious, BG to respond with a few limp threats of violence toward the Dog Pound, and Silky Fine to half-heartedly inject herself into the conflict when she and her GBM group members were destined for the chopping block. Only Dresta lands a few stinging blows, which are backed with more violent intent than the ones in Real Compton CDGs.
And you won't see R.I.P., you'll see PND, a punk deceased.
A much better retort is What Would You Do, obviously a mockery of the Dog Pound song title and enhanced by Tony G's eerie 80s horror flick style layers of pads, synths, and organs, accompanied by a verse from his ghostwriter Dirty Red. Eazy-E, with a double-tracked voice and a lampooning of hooks from the original Dog Pound song and Snoop Doggy Dogg's Murder Was the Case, mainly unloads on the duo of Daz and Corrupt as no difference from the rest of their death row homies. At least he owns and runs his own company. Dre, Snoop, and the Dog Pound are nothing but underlings of Suge Knight, who keeps them all on a short leash. Pun intended.
What would you do? What would you do if we rode on you?
Obviously, both Old School Shit and What Would You Do were recorded around late 1994. The Dog Pound song ended up on the Natural Born Killers soundtrack, which was released in August, as well as the Murder Was the Case soundtrack for Snoop Doggy Dogg's 18-minute music video of the same name, which was released in October. Few, if any, knew that Eazy-E and Dre were on the path of reconciliation by early 1995. Besides, with a derisive single like What Would You Do, which was successful enough to grab a Grammy nod and be performed at what would turn out to be the infamous 1995 Source Awards, it was advisable to make it known that at least Eazy-E left this earth with a worthy response or two. DJ Yella, the only N.W.A member who never fell out with Eazy-E and turned out to be the only one at Eazy-E's funeral, had the unenviable task of piecing together Straight Off the Streets as the designated associate producer. Sonically, stylistically, and even conceptually, the album is a haphazard affair. Temporary Insanity outtakes live next to completed songs. Eazy-E's rhyming performance varies from wobbly to strident. Chaotic East Coast beats and mellow G-funk grooves transition between each other. The Tretch-penned Nuts on Your Chin and the Naughty by Nature produced Hit the Hooker are Jerseyite slices of bread that sandwich Yella's Californian fill-in, which comprise the motherfucking and lickin' suckin' filler, like Gangsta Beats for the Street, is left in to further establish BG Knockout and Dresta Fealty, as well as showcase Menage a Trois on the heels of their recently released Chalicious album. The six-foe cruise-worthy Just to Let You Know was inoffensive enough to promote as a single, which, combined with Eazy's passing, peaked at number 45 on the Billboard Hot 100. The whole affair could have been a complete disaster, but Yella did all that he could to sequence the tracks in a way that highlights Straight Off the Streets as Eazy's most sonically diverse record, rather than his most disorganized one. Straight Off the Streets is standard gangster fare for the 9.5 and the 9.6. It doesn't exactly push the envelope on anything, not that that was expected. My Baby's Mama is a rare lucid first-person account of bravado, condemning women who abuse child support arrangements to the detriment of responsible men, and that had to sting, coming from someone of obvious means. Otherwise, it's the same misogyny expected from E, minus the long-gone lightheartedness of Eazy Does It. Eazy is more weathered by the brutality of life, so songs like the extremely vulgar Hit the Hooker, the catchy hook-driven Nuts on Your Chin, and Lickin' Suckin' which is essentially slow dirty talking over the impeach the president breakbeat, feel stark and soulless. Other tracks come off better. Creep and Crawl, produced by Yella, is a delightful dungeon of thunderous bass with an echoing piano note puncturing the atmosphere at every second beat per bar. It's perfect for Eazy-E's grisly storytelling of mayhem and murder before the inevitable shootout with cops, topped by a chopped sample of, what else? Deep Cover. Sorry Louie, with Bobcat creating an energetically funky atmosphere, merging Millie Jackson's I Cry with the Don't Change Your Love breakbeat, feels like a companion of Neighborhood Sniper, albeit with a Louisville slugger instead of a long-range rifle. It's Eazy-E at his sadistic best. Sippin' on a 40 is also worthy of mention, using the same word sample that Tony D made famous with Rock This Funky Joint by Poor Righteous Teachers. Eazy-E, already with 8 Ball, the song that popularized Old English and rap, rides around with BG Knockout and Dresta. The three of them are on a mini adventure, on a mission to buy and consume their favorite beverage with their mutual homeboys, and their weed rolled up in zigzags. It's a trip worth having. Unfortunately, that trip is without 2 of Eazy-E's major beatmakers. The contribution of Rhythm D, the man behind Real Compton CDGs, is sorely missed. But he was growing into his own in the middle of working out a deal with Priority Records, a former distributor of Ruthless. Also sorely missed is Cold 187, but with his above-the-law contract with Ruthless ended, he and the rest of his Pomona homies were also busy working out a deal for their next home. Perhaps the presence of Rhythm D and Cold 187, then at their peaks, could have enhanced the overall production feel of Straight Off the Streets. And no amount of patching to make the album feel like Eazy-E's official second studio album could get rid of the specter of death. Straight Off the Streets is bookended by a track that hints at a resurrection scenario involving Eazy, and another that reveals his mortal departure and Yella's unfailing duty to see the album completion through, complete with the presence of Roger Troutman with his talkbox. The last song Eazy-E ever recorded, the slow, mellow, G-funk harnessed The Motherfucking Real, lands in the middle of the record, featuring MC Ren, who had not been on speaking terms with Eazy for about 2 years because the latter simply wouldn't let his anti-Dre campaign go. By this point, Eazy had sensed that his days were numbered, and that makes some of the bars in this song sadly foreboding.
To be exact, my tombstone should read, he put Compton on that map.
Straight Off the Streets of Motherfucking Compton was moderately received. Inundated by gangster rap's dominance, the reviews were generally wary of the same old topics. But the album did well enough to peak at number 3 on the Billboard 200, the best performance of any Eazy-E multi-track project. It would eventually go gold midway through 1996. Straight Off the Streets was released around the time Eazy-E's protégés were peaking. Bone Thugs-n-Harmony had scored big with the double platinum, Grammy-winning #1 crossover hit single that was The Crossroads, and its accompanying quadruple platinum album, East 1999 Eternal. The Crossroads, a personal elegy transformed into a wider-ranging dedication to the dearly departed, came with a music video featuring Eazy-E among the persons making their way to heaven. The whole affair was an appropriate send-off, and a hopeful future for Ruthless Records, which used Bone Thugs-n-Harmony to close out the 1990s strong, before settling into primarily being a catalog company. Eazy-E deserves better, even though it's understandable why his legacy is not as strong as many of the comparable greats of his era. While he remains crystallized in time as somewhat of a caricature, his fellow N.W.A. alumni, Dr. Dre and Ice Cube, lived on and further bolstered their respective legacies, including with the Straight Outta Compton biopic that came out in 2015. The movie turned out to be a hagiography of Dre and Cube, especially of Dre, while Eazy was mostly portrayed as a clueless, uncontrollable, hypersexual, and impish music executive who agonized over seeing a billboard of the Chronic and sold weed from his palatial home as though strapped for cash. Moreover, Eazy-E's catalog, while solid, is not exceptional, and it not only feels ordinary standing next to albums such as The Chronic, Doggy Style, America's Most Wanted, or Death Certificate. Hip-hop also prematurely lost Tupac a year after Eazy, and the Notorious B.I.G. the year after Pac, and both men towered over Eazy in skill level, cultural impact, commercial success, quality of output, and overall reputation. The immediate posthumous releases from both Pac and Biggie, the Don Illuminati, the 7 Day Theory, and Life After Death, respectively, are far superior to that of Eazy's. And it also unfortunately helped that they were felled by a hail of bullets, thereby rendering them martyrs and fallen street soldiers, rather than by a sexually transmitted disease that people were uncomfortable to talk about. But ultimately, there's a reason why Eazy-E is still revered as the Godfather of Gangsta Rap. Without him, there's obviously no Ruthless Records, and there's no N.W.A and its offspring and various offshoots. And without him, there really is no gangsta rap, because it's not enough to make a gangsta rap song. There has to be a consistent flow of output, practitioners, and corporate backing to turn a song into a movement, and that's what Eazy-E was able to accomplish. Straight Off the Streets of Motherfucking Compton is a flawed, inconsistent hodgepodge of a record. It's a replacement of what should have been a truly finished double album, thereby predating Tupac's All Eyes on Me as the first of its kind. But it's a passable album, a snapshot of a deeply imperfect artist who nevertheless overachieved in the art form of rap, and at a time when recorded rap was still very young. Straight Off the Streets forced hip-hop culture to confront, for the first time, how to handle the work of a major artist released immediately after their untimely passing. It was a skill, how to straddle the line between reverence and repudiation, that hip-hop fans would have to hone with several subsequent losses, starting from Tupac and Biggie onward. Even in death, Eazy-E was a pioneer. Thanks for watching. For those new here, welcome to Rap Perspective. For the Rappleheads, I greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, comment on, and share this video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I encourage everyone to watch, like, comment on, and share other videos on here. See you in the next video.